What's up, Hockey Talk Show fans? Some breaking news on this late Saturday night. The New York Rangers have fired head coach Alain Vigneault after 5 seasons as the bench boss of the Blue Shirts. And I got to tell you, I am completely stunned, and I am completely in my living room. 11:30 p.m. in the Eastern Standard Time. So that's why I'm trying to whisper a little bit. Kids are sleeping, wife in bed trying to relax and read a book. But honestly, shock for me that the Rangers have parted ways with Alain Vigneault. I think this is Jeff Gordon's first misstep as general manager of the New York Rangers. I think Alain Vigneault is a very special coach. I think he is one of the smarter coaches in the National Hockey League, and I don't know if he's the right guy for the job with the Rangers right now, going through this youth movement and this rebuild that they are doing. But as we've seen with the Boston Bruins and the New Jersey Devils, sometimes these rebuilds don't really take as long as you think. And I think he is definitely the kind of coach that you want behind the bench if you're challenging for the playoffs and for a Stanley Cup. Let's not forget, Alain Vigneault took the Rangers to their first Stanley Cup final since they won the championship back in 1994. Now, they lost to the Kings, but still, they got there at least. And I always thought he did a really good job managing that bench, never really always having that go-to quintessential player. You know, he had Nash, who, let's be honest, after his first couple of seasons, wasn't really the Rick Nash that was drafted in Columbus. He had Marty St. Louis for a little while. They did have a good team, and he had success with them. He managed them really well. I thought he did a phenomenal job with the team when it was at its height. It declined since then, but I always felt that that responsibility fell more in the general manager's chair than in the coach's chair. I think that there are a few coaches in the National Hockey League that you hold on to no matter what. Joel Quenneville is one of them. And I think Alain Vigneault is definitely another one. The interesting move for the Rangers, though, preseason was bringing in Lindy Ruff. Does he step in and take the place of Alain Vigneault? Does he even want the job now that the Rangers are headed in the direction that they're headed in? I don't know. A lot of unanswered questions here, but I do know this. It definitely is going to put a lot of pressure on some of the other teams across the National Hockey League. This is the first season that I have ever seen, that I could ever remember, where we've gone through the entire year and a coach hasn't been fired. Rangers finished their season this afternoon with a loss against the Flyers, 5-0, and then they fired their coach. He's the first firing of the year, and technically there's a makeup game on Sunday, but technically this is the last day of the NHL season, and technically the Rangers season is over already since they played their last game. So I think that this move, though, does put a little pressure on some of the other franchises out there, most notably the Edmonton Oilers. What do you do now if you're Edmonton, having the season that you had? I've been a big advocate of Todd McLuhan, saying that he should not be fired, but things change, as we saw with Montreal and Claude Julien. The second he became available, first place Montreal went ahead and fired their coach to get the guy that they really wanted. Do you let an Alain Vigneault just sit out there and not go out there and get him? I think Todd McLuhan deserves another year behind the bench for the Edmonton Oilers, but my opinion on that changes drastically when Alain Vigneault is out there and available. You look at some of the other underachieving teams across the league, the New York Islanders. What happens with them? If Garth Snow goes, should Doug Weight go in return? I got to be honest with you, as an Islander fan, again, the only reason why I'm not making those moves is because I want some stability when I'm negotiating the John Tavares contract. If John comes and meets with the ownership and says, I want to stay here, but I'm not sure about the direction of the future, that means fire the coach, fire the general manager, and my first phone call would be to Alain Vigneault, because I think he'd be able to work wonders with the Islanders bench. I got to say Vancouver, too. They've had the year that they've had. He's a former coach in Vancouver. It's not beyond the possibility that he returns there. With all due respect to Travis Green, Alain Vigneault is one of those special coaches. I don't necessarily see him sitting out for an entire NHL season unless he really wants to. He is definitely going to be interviewing for jobs, whoever does wind up firing their head coach. So I think it'll be his choice if he sits out for a year. But I just don't really foresee that happening. I just can't really see that happening. St. Louis is in the fight of their life right now, and Mike Yeo was the guy. They're going to have to think about this now. If Colorado doesn't make it in, or if they do make it in, I think that their head coach has done a great job. But still, you're getting to this point where you got one of the best in the business that's available. Even if you had planned to stick with your guy moving forward, you've got to take a second and think, do I want to make a move here and get Alain Vigneault? Same thing with Phil Housley in Buffalo. Sure, and Buffalo royalty and all that, but it was an underachieving year for them. Not necessarily the coach's fault. Again, I think Buffalo sits more in the general manager's chair and all the turnover that they've had the last couple of years. But if you're Buffalo, you know, after you made that huge run at Babcock, you got to take a look at an Alain Vigneault if he's available to you. So I think that this is definitely going to send some ripples across the league. But I think the big one for me is the Edmonton Oilers. That is the most likely situation where they were probably going to stick with Todd McLuhan, because if they weren't, they would have fired him already. Plenty of chances to do that in the middle of the year. They're probably going to stick with Todd McLuhan. Now, I think it's something that they may have to rethink. So we'll wait and see what happens there. But it's breaking news tonight. Alain Vigneault relieved of his head coaching duties. 5 seasons, a trip to the Stanley Cup final. I forget what his record was. Oh, I do have it. 226, 147, and 37. A big-time winning coach for the New York Rangers. I'm pretty shocked and stunned that he was fired. It's one thing to quit or leave or, mutually part ways. But for me, again, I'll repeat, this is the first misstep from Jeff Gorton as the general manager of the New York Rangers, because it doesn't get much better than Alain Vigneault. And maybe he doesn't develop the guys as good as some other coaches, but again, a la Boston, a la the Devils, if you want to go on one of these quick turnarounds, or that a quick turnaround is a possibility, a good coach is a good coach is a good coach. And Alain Vigneault is one of the cream of the crop. So I'm pretty surprised and pretty shocked that he was fired. And I know what a lot of the detractors are going to say, well, look at their record. Well, they were terrible. This team was built like garbage. And I said that at the beginning of the year when I caught heat for saying that Henrik Lundqvist should be traded if the Rangers aren't in it. And I just knew that this team wasn't built the way these teams were built 3 or 4 years ago when they were over there, making big, long playoff runs, getting into the Stanley Cup final. It was not the same team. They kept putting Band-Aids and weaker Band-Aids on top of weaker Band-Aids. So I don't necessarily blame the coach for that. I don't know any coach in this league, Mike Babcock, Scotty Bowman. I don't know any coach that could have gotten more out of this Ranger team this year, even with Lundqvist and all of that. So I'm pretty surprised. I thought Vigneault would have stuck around. I don't know why you commit to a rebuild mid-season, send out a letter to your fans, keep the coach, and then fire him at the end of the year. Like, what transpired between the time that you sent the letter and now that made you fire him? Because you should have just done it then when you committed to the rebuild. What's the sense of having him evaluate players and having him decide on ice time and all the rest if you weren't going to keep him there for the long run? So kind of a weird little mysterious move when you really delve into it a little bit. But I'm sure we'll dive more into this on the next Hockey Talk show that we do live. Remember, you guys can always call in and comment below. I'll be reading the comments on this all night long, so let me know what you think there. Follow along, share this video, share it to all the Ranger fans. Alain Vigneault relieved of his head coaching duties after 5 seasons with the New York Rangers.